Hello there, and welcome back to the show, World War II Books, Where to Start. I'm your host, General Eric Hoepner, and let's do another book blitz today of World War II titles I've read in the pretty recent past, maybe stretching back at most 2 years, but never fit into a video for one reason or another. Quality ranges from a couple of real eye rollers to fairly dull to excellent. Nothing extended here, just some snap summary, so button up your panzer and let's get ready to roll east towards the Bend and the Don and our destiny. So now, let's hit the books. All right, first up, Auschwitz and the Allies by Martin Gilbert from 1981. Kind of a golden oldie, 368 pages total. My only other Martin Gilbert experience is his History of the Great War, which I thought was fantastic. And this book, however, is kind of bland and has that like a punch that I associate with old school British historians, where everything is meh and how about a cup of tea to think it over. This has a few standout moments in what ought to be full of high-level political debate over the fate of Europe's Jews and caught in German camps, but it's just not. The big moment of the book is the Eichmann offer of Jews for trucks late in the war to the Western Allies that, according to Gilbert, threw the Allied governments into a bit of a tizzy as what to do with such a hand grenade they had to toss around all of a sudden. But while there was strong opposition to any kind of military aid to Germany, even if it was just trucks, regardless of the humanitarian reasons involved, the real red light was Britain's overriding policy of not allowing any Jews to reach Palestine because of Arab unrest and the feared post-war issues. Halifax and Eden really shine through here as the prime movers to kill the Eichmann proposal. Gilbert relates a refugee ship of a few hundred Jews from Turkey to Palestine that sunk by U-boat, leaving only 5 survivors. This book, again, was from 1981, and Gilbert is a bit off on this one. The ship in question was a tiny 52-ton, probably a fishing boat named the Mercure, attacked by a Soviet sub with torpedoes and machine guns, killing 305 with just 11 survivors. So he's way off on that. Not to really be blamed or to say this is indicative of bad research. It's 1981, and he's probably going for just a little incident on the way as opposed to deep exploration here. As to the question of why the Allies didn't use their bomber fleets to destroy Auschwitz, it's a far more difficult proposition than it sounds like on paper, due to distance involved and the lack of Soviet assistance on the other end that could have made it more feasible, like the shuttle bombing missions they had tried, and Soviets weren't wild about. Aside from the moral question of whether killing enslaved prisoners was kinder than what they were enduring, Air Force generals were less enthusiastic about the idea of ordering their men to sacrifice their lives in an effort to kill victims of Nazi enslavement. It just didn't add up. In the end, Monowitz was bombed twice before it at least had the pretext of being an industrial complex linked to the Nazi war economy, if, very tentatively, and therefore a worthwhile military target. While the second strike was more effective than the first, there was no love for this mission, and the idea was not persisted with. This book covers an important moment in the war, but it's overall just not well related and needs an updated attempt by another author. That's Auschwitz and the Allies by Martin Gilbert. All right then, Eyewitness Auschwitz by Philip Muller, 1979, 180 pages. A Czech betrayed by his own countrymen and deported to Auschwitz, Muller spent 2 years in Auschwitz, primarily in the Sonderkommando, before being death-marched out to Mauthausen near the end of the war. His descriptions of the crematoria where he worked are detailed. His terror of the SS guards palpable, as any perceived mistake could instantly get him killed. The random behavior of those guards made their lives a huge guessing game as to what might get them a bit of extra food and what might get them killed. The process of selections when fresh transports arrived and the evolving system the SS came up with to kill prisoners quickly and with as little panic and hysteria as could be managed certainly lends viability to the image and metaphor used of industrialized death factories. The memoir is short and vivid, but there are some gaps and some matters are not explained well, leaving many questions. My biggest question mark is how he lasted nearly his full stint in the camp in the Sonderkommando. According to most other histories, the SS normally let any one commando go about 3 months, and then they would be killed in turn, eliminating any possible witnesses after the war. It also has some of the same feel as the memoir by the one prisoner, Dr. Miklos Niesli, where you can feel how empty these men had become after all their suffering. But for a direct look into the crematoria themselves, it's recommended. Eyewitness Auschwitz by Philip Muller. right, Naples, 1944 by Keith Lowe from 2025, 464 pages total. Man, oh man, this has a lot going on, and I really do need to do a full take on this later, but for now, he discusses the best-known book on Naples by Norman Lewis, and how many things he put down as fact were exaggerated or never happened at all. And Lowe himself related one of these stories, taking it at face value without checking for his Savage Continent book. He also says Rick Atkinson relates an oft-told tale about the rare tropical fish in the Naples Auditorium being killed and cooked up at dinner for the higher-ups that never happened. It's a cautionary tale for historians when you're chasing down anecdotes. The Germans have left behind many time-delayed bombs, having learned that trick from Stalin's boys way back in Kiev in 42 or 41. There were caves and catacombs beneath the city, and a rumor was started that an SS unit was hiding down there, unable to find its way out. But if you listened, you could hear them wandering around. Search parties find nothing. Prostitution is said to be some of the most widespread in all of Europe, with brothers pimping their sisters, mothers pimping their daughters, and you know what that means for the VD rates. Race and prostitution issues mean that black GIs pay up to 10 times the going rate that white soldiers do. And another predictable result is the hundreds of illegitimate fathers' children after the war. Another aspect of the Wild West feel to the situation was the ever-present issue of rape and the idea that Africa actually started in Naples. And you know what that means. The Guerrières and French Saharan troops were allowed to roam the countryside doing what they pleased. French army officers hardly cared, and General Join told them to behave themselves as conquerors. The German takeover in 43 is interesting, but the Italian revolt is not. Told at too great a length and involving street networks and barricades here and barricades there, it's just a mishmash and a mush, and that's what brings it down. It just goes on too long. What a quick summary would have sufficed, but I guess he's playing to the audience he might have in Italy by detailing their brave resistance to the Germans. I don't know. I think it could have been chopped considerably. There's more, but I'll save it for later when I do a full review of this one. So take it as a teaser. That's Naples, 1944 by Keith Lowe. Crack and Thump by Charles Scheffel from 2007, 320 pages. This one ought to have been superlative. Scheffel had a busy and death-defying war, but it's told here through the filter of the interviewer, Barry Basden, and what I like to call, for lack of a better term, a second-person memoir, and thus it suffers. I think back to Hell and Back and how that was a collaboration between Audie Murphy and a ghostwriter, and the fantastic results the two of them produced. And the serious disappointment that this couldn't have had the same method or same thoroughness, shall we say. Scheffel had encounters with some of the big names of the war, starting with Eisenhower's driver Kay Summersby, General Alexander, and Patton, whom he did not like in the slightest, displaying his famous bombast and lack of sense at certain points, this point involving sending tanks down a road commanded by German artillery in Sicily. One of the more than glorious moments Scheffel has to deal with is being put in command of organizing a whorehouse for the men after the Germans surrender in North Africa. A thankless job if I've ever heard one. Let's see. Sent in a second wave on Utah Beach in the 9th Division, he catches a piece of shrapnel in what you might call a very sensitive area. And when returned to combat, he is jumped to company commander and has a very harrowing charge across France that sees him nearly killed many, many times. His final wounding puts him out of combat for good. Final tally, 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze and Silver Star, Combat Infantry Star, and of course, a Croix de Guerre. His luck never abandons him, though. Trying to fly home, he fails to talk his way onto a C-54 that later just vanishes over the Atlantic. The plane he does take is fired on by a convoy's AA batteries because of a changed flight plan. It's a fascinating story, but it's told, as I said, through a thick filter that sucks the emotion and immediacy right out of it. Thus, that's 2 stars for me. That's Crack and Thump by Charles Scheffel. Barry Basden actually gets the cover credit, but I hardly think it's earned. Staff Passage by Evelyn Iritani, 480 pages total from 2026. This is a killer here. It's got a long subtitle, but I'll spare you the BS. Look, if your title is so damn common, you need a 20-word subtitle, which is an entire sentence, right? Don't use that title. Brainstorm a bit. Hell, ask your AI buddy for a better suggestion. But bottom line, you need to do better. Which is the takeaway from me for the entire exercise here. She's got a great angle in an obscure event in the war with plenty of open field ahead of her to run wild and score an unopposed goal. And she bungles it so bad you just want to scream. The event here is the many voyages of the Gripsholm, a Swedish ship used during the war to take interned citizens of enemy nations back to their home countries. Along with that are the diplomatic negotiations to make these voyages possible through third-party nations oftentimes. This leads us to the internment camps for Japanese Americans on the mainland of the U.S. Japan had a long list of names of Japanese they want to send back to them in exchange for Americans that they were holding, whether these people had ever set foot in Japan or not. The thing was, believe it or not, America, having detained these people by executive order, did not automatically deport them at the whim of the Japanese. Citizens had the right to refuse repatriation to another nation that was, after all, not theirs. The State Department and FBI could put pressure on these people to agree to deportation, naturally, seizing their property and financial assets and even their insurance policies. And they did. Bad, Uncle Sam, bad. But the bottom line was that these folks didn't want to sign up to be deported. They couldn't be deported. To add to this, the second and third Gripsholm exchanges were being arranged. As they were being arranged, the U.S. was just running out of the Japanese to send back that Japan would accept. But they were holding our people as hostages in awful conditions, and in some cases, torturing them and accusing them of being spies, who can be put on trial and executed. So what does Uncle Sam do? Well, it's not pretty. It's not pretty. Uncle Sam's desires to engage in what can only be termed in today's language as human trafficking, and I'm not sure how you would have what you would have called it back in the 40s. I'm not trying to be modern political here, but I really can't think of another term to use except human trafficking. And here's how it worked. We did a deal with Peru. Yeah, Peru. To give them loans and military equipment if they would denaturalize and deport their Japanese citizenry to the U.S. There was a sizable community there due to the anti-immigration laws of the United States from earlier in the century. Japanese had settled in Peru instead of here, and they were felt no more welcome than they did in the United States. So Peru is happy to be rid of a subpopulation they don't want, and the deal is done. Some are sent by train to the States, where they end up at camps before being shipped off to Japan. Some are sent by railports from Peru to other South American countries to await the Gripsholm as it makes its way painstakingly to Japan. This is an important story to tell. It's just that Iritani is the absolute wrong, dead wrong, worst person to tell it. Why is that, you ask? Because she is far more interested in travelogue human interest BS than the moral quagmire Uncle Sam has trapped himself in. We get the personal touch in the form of a few folks who are caught up in this net of forced repatriation, such as Emily Hahn, New York Times journalist who has popped up in other books I've read recently involving spies in China, and who is an utter waste of words. However, I would like to nominate her for Mother of the Year twice for endangering her child's life by refusing to be repatriated from Singapore because her British lover is in prison there and she can't bear to be parted from him. My summary here makes it sound pretty intriguing, but it is in fact dull as dishwater and painfully insulting. She's more than half in love with the image of Emily Hahn, and that's the heart of the problem. You want to do a bio on her? Do that. Don't dress it up with all this hullabaloo that you're only a half-ass worried about. There's no way this ain't on my worst list for this year, and it's automatic 0 stars. That's Safe Passage and the Never-Ending Subtitle by Evelyn Iritani. City of Thieves by Benioff, 250 pages from 2008. All right, it's a novel. I'm suckered in by some gushing reviews. A Leningrad novel about the harsh conditions during the siege of Leningrad. Okay, I'm in. Cool. Love the siege of Leningrad. What did I get? Pain and never-ending eye-rolling. That's what I got. So the conceit here is that the prologue narrator is a journalist trying to pry the story of his grandparents' war in Russia out of them late in life, and finally gets Gramps to open up and tell him the story on the front porch one night, right? But the grandson isn't satisfied and presses for more details, and the old man gets frustrated and tells him to make up the rest of the... Hell, he's a writer. Make up some bullshit, right? Because you're a writer. And that right there is Benioff telling us he doesn't know what the bleep he's doing, and he's going to romp right off the rails on a wild bender to tell us about his sexually deviant fantasies since he was a young boy. Yeah, I'm reading the author's intent, and deliberately so. With a novel, you're supposed to A, suspend your disbelief in order to accept the fiction you're about to be told, and B, in a literature study, you're supposed to disassociate yourself from what you think is the author's real intent, or what he's really like in life, or what his personal proclivities are. The story is supposed to stand or fall on its own, full stop. I can't do it here. I can't. He's telling us what he is and where his mind is for all the nearly all the 258 pages. It's in everyone else's crotch. So the framework of the story is a teen breaking curfew and a soldier deserting from the trenches outside Leningrad. They get sent on a fetch quest by an NKVD colonel for some fresh eggs for his daughter's upcoming wedding. And they have till the end of the week to find them, or it's a bullet for both of them. Well, this is an old one, right? Go find a treasure, and I will reward thee handsomely, O strange traveler. So it's off to adventure for these two oddballs, and adventure they find, from a husband and wife team carving up Leningraders to sell the meat to unsuspecting customers, to wandering out of the city to helpfully stumble on a hunting lodge with several pretty girls inside dancing to American jazz music. Can't believe I'm saying this shit out loud. Just can't. I can't believe this crap. Anyone thought it was okay to publish. And these pretty young things are the property of a Einsatzing group unit stationed in the area. And their officers are, of course, the baddies of the story, and they do terrible things to young pretty girls trapped in a cabin in the Russian winter dancing around to American jazz music. I nearly forgot to mention the recurring problem of those characters gleefully telling the other how badly he needs to poop and how long it's been since he has. Silly of me. There's also a Quentin Tarantino homage to be found in this awful tale. It's impossible to miss the link. But that's enough. I think you get the picture. I saw through it to the inevitable wannabe semi-tragic / ironic end, easily predicting it all the way. This novel, I'd say, ought to be read only if you're absolutely disgusted with every other book in your personal collection at the moment and need a distraction. Put it in a secure glass case with a break only in case of emergency sign on it. And yes, this is also guaranteed to be on my list of worst books this year. No way it can't be. That's City of Thieves by David Benioff. Okay, and that completes your order for Book Blitz number 2. I zipped through 6 books of widely varying quality and perhaps questionable need to exist so that you, dear viewer, can be an informed buyer of books of the Second World War. I do hope that 1 or 2 of these have piqued your interest, and that perhaps I've saved you from a horrible decision, so there need be no buyer's regret. I'm Eric Hoepner, and looks like I put my money on the wrong horse. Looks like Der Fuhrer, as it turns out, has survived the Stauffenberg attempt. Verdammt. I better lawyer up, because things ain't looking so good. Until next time, happy reading.